to Human Capital Matters. It's an interactive Zoom event with the business community that our firm at Human Capital Solutions launched 12 months ago as the pandemic was new. We talk about business continuity planning and execution, and now we have a look of 12 months later, looking ahead, examining best-in-class practices. And we're fortunate today to have Mr. Brooks Raiford with us from the North Carolina Technology Association. Brooks is the CEO, and he's been in that role for quite a while. His main office is in Raleigh with a satellite office in Charlotte. Welcome, Brooks. We're very thankful to have you with us today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. What we'd like to do is a couple of housekeeping items. We have some folks that'll be live. We are recording this for folks. It'll be placed on LinkedIn and some other sites in about 1 week. And we will be encouraging folks towards the end of this 30-minute segment to use the chat room and to make this truly interactive. So Brooks, as we jump into the first question, provide us with a brief overview, if you would, of the North Carolina Technology Association. Brooks, what is North Carolina Tech's role in the marketplace and your specific value proposition to the community?
Sure. Well, thank you. The North Carolina Technology Association, that's our full name. We go by NC Tech for simplicity. We've been around actually around 28 years now. We were founded in the early 90s when there was really no statewide industry group or industry voice for the tech sector. And there was an appetite to do that. And so we took advantage of that. This is before my formal service with the organization, although I was familiar with it at the time and did work with it in some ways. So we are the advocacy organization and voice and convener of the tech sector. We define sector more broadly than just tech companies. You know, there are people who themselves are tech workers, but may work in a non-tech company. And then there are people who are maybe not be tech workers, but they work for a tech company. And so although that seems like a small distinction, it can be quite large. Think the difference between Belk Department Stores, which has an IT organization, and IBM. So you can be a non-tech worker at IBM and you can be a tech worker at Belk. So that distinction is important to note. Companies and organizations are our members. So when a company is a member, all of their employees have membership status. We're a lot like a chamber of commerce in this way. I use that as a simple analogy. We offer various programs, conferences, peer networks, market research, especially around talent, which is a big issue and concern for hirers of talent, as you can imagine, tech talent. In the near term, we have an annual State of Technology conference. We like that name because it implies we are the state of technology, but also it's sort of a question, what is the state of technology? And every May, in early May, we host a conference that IBM is the presenting sponsor for. And this year, our theme is around the total experience, or TX is sort of the new catchphrase. And it talks about the intersection of customer, employee, and user experience. So that'll be a really interesting session. We feature startups. We have a startup showcase. We do a lot of interesting things with that. And then we also publish an annual State of the Sector report. We commission this report to compare North Carolina in a bunch of different metrics to all the states and rank us in how we're doing. We don't consider this a puff piece. It actually, it shows where we are middling. It shows where we're behind, but it also shows where we excel. And the good news is we're doing very well in a lot of areas. In fact, you can look at that report anytime during the year at a dedicated website. It's NCSTIR, NCSTIR.com. It'll just give you a flavor for how North Carolina stacks up.
Excellent. Yes, we're glad to learn more about NC Technology Association. Our firm works across the lower 48, and some years our revenue clients are out of San Jose, sometimes Boston, Austin, Texas, and we're excited of what's going on, and we'll be continuing in the RTP, the Raleigh-Durham area for technology and North Carolina jobs and economic development. So Brooks, when we think about bringing people together, and that's what an association does and offering value, that certainly has changed quite a bit over the past year. Lots of challenges, certainly with COVID-19, distancing, restrictions to gather. How has your organization been able to successfully overcome some of these obvious challenges while continuing to offer and support the member base?
Well, the first thing I have to say is, although we have a small professional staff and a lot of volunteer leadership, our team has really worked hard to pivot quickly back in about this time a year ago to immediately have to move away from in-person gatherings to virtual gatherings and virtual offerings of resources. It is very true, much like a chamber of commerce or any other industry group, we normally host dozens and dozens of in-person gatherings per year. Some are small, round tables, others are panel discussions with an audience. And then we have a half a dozen at least major conferences or gatherings where hundreds of people would normally participate in person. So for the past year, all this has been converted to virtual programming. We did actually host our annual golf tournament last August in person in Pinehurst, and it was a sellout. We actually met our sponsorship goals and filled every slot. I think everybody was really anxious to get outside and convene in that way. So we were able to do that, but everything else was virtual. Ironically, our two most successful virtual events in 2020 were new for 2020, and we planned them in 2019, and they were supposed to be in person, but they had to convert. One was our Diversity and Inclusion in Tech Summit in the summer, and then a little later on was our Summit for Women in Tech in the fall. And they were so successful as virtual events even that we've added them to our lineup, and they're part of our annual signature events. In fact, the Diversity and Inclusion in Tech Summit just wrapped up today. It was held yesterday and today. Anybody who's interested in getting all that content can still go to nctech.org/diversity. Interestingly, the chief technology officer of Microsoft for the US is an African-American woman who lives in Raleigh. So although she's a virtual keynoter, she's right here. And we had a lot of great panels and speakers, really impressive stuff. So virtual's been okay for us. We've actually been able to extend our reach. People don't have to travel, but we miss the in-person. We definitely will want to get back to in-person, but the difference is going forward, we will blend in virtual with our in-person, because while in-person's great, you and I probably are similar in that way. You appreciate the in-person interaction and kind of crave that. It does limit participation to some extent because of geography, cost of travel, lodging, and so on. And virtual is a way to overcome those barriers.
When you're back in the full travel mode again, Brooks, remember the Wilmington Convention Center. Just put a little plug in there. So we are excited to see folks getting on planes and traveling again and staying in hotels and visiting their favorite restaurants. It is truly exciting, for us. Amanda Latham, she's our managing director, heads up our Raleigh RTP office. And for you guys, the compounding effect of technology, it's just hard to really get your head around. For the North Carolina Tech Association, Brooks, what type of plans are in place to continue to excel and offer the value for this new normal that we're going to probably be in for a while, and the challenges that we'll be facing?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, because we went to virtual, everybody went virtual very quickly in a way they would never have planned to do, but we had to. And necessity is the mother of invention, as they say. So a lot of organizations, small like ours, large companies, and so on, had to adapt immediately and didn't really have a choice on whether to adapt. They only had choices on how. Some were successful, some struggled. Thankfully, we have a partnership with a great AV company that had already been working with us on our larger events for years. And they were able to very quickly pivot to a platform approach that allowed us to offer blended events. By blended, I mean some of the programming was live, a live keynoter with Q&A, or a live panel discussion, as well as pre-recorded segments, which frankly gave us the opportunity to get people to speak who might not have come from across the country to speak on a stage, but would be happy to record a video where they are speaking, and you can get some really high caliber folks without having the logistics and expense and time of having them come in person. So as I was saying a moment ago, we will move to a blend of in-person and virtual, just to accommodate the convenience of everyone. But we're anxious to get back to in-person, likely with this combination. I also expect, as I mentioned, we have a small staff both in Raleigh and in Charlotte. I doubt we'll go back to a 8 to 5 sort of in the office environment with a little bit of out of office travel or lunch meetings or occasional conferences. It'll probably be some blend of in office and remote. And frankly, that's going to be a challenge. I've got a meeting set up with my leadership team here in a couple of weeks to talk about that. How do we figure that out? What's fair? What's good for the organization? What's good for our constituency? And how do we make sure that productivity remains strong? And we serve the needs of all those constituencies that I mentioned. But I imagine it will be a blend regardless. And we will take our learnings over the past year. We'll incorporate more customized communications to our members. You can't blast everybody all the time. So how do you build communities of interest? We've actually done that with a platform that we've introduced over this past year. We'll use more channels to reach people in a wider variety of ways, catch people where they are. And where they tend to pay attention. And one of the advantages of virtual programming is you can reach people anywhere. And plus, with recording a live event that previously might not have been recorded, it's available for an extended period of time. So we have a lot of people now registering for events who can't watch live. They can't be present when it's being presented, but they have access to watch it at their leisure and maybe even in segments later on. And so that's a huge advantage. Because geography doesn't matter, and thanks to video, people can view those programs all at once or whenever it suits their needs.
We are seeing that's the case with this new offerings of this. In some events, going back to face will work for a lot of people, and then best in class practice, as you mentioned, recording events where we watch it on demand, watch it when we want to watch it in the comfort of our home. At any time. So you're right. There will be some growth that will come out of this new offering, perhaps.
Yeah.
Great.
I think so. I think people. I won't mention the brand name, but there's a major international technology company that we would all know the brand name of, and they have, like many of them do, a very large annual conference of all of their customers and users and so on. And normally it's a few thousand people in a place like Las Vegas. You know how those things go. They did it this past year as a virtual event, and they went to 80,000 people. And the feedback they got was that although many of the regular attenders missed the in-person, the fun and the engagement and all of that, which certainly has its place, and you never want to get rid of that. Having it virtual meant that a lot of people who've never been able to participate just couldn't afford it, couldn't afford the time, et cetera, were able to. So they've determined that going forward, they will no longer have a just virtual or just in-person annual confab. It'll be a hybrid so people can really participate however they want to.
Brooks, anything else you'd want to add over the next, say, 3 years that you anticipate the role of the NC Tech Association taking on?
Something we would take on?
Well, your crystal ball that you may see and anticipate regarding your role change and the nuances of value you may be offering.
Got you. Well, there's one thing that we do already that I think will become more valuable. We'll have to make sure that we are well attuned to how to make it even more valuable. So you mentioned at the outset, the nature of an association is that we are a convener. We gather people in one way or another. And so we'll continue to do that. But people are anxious for best practices. They're anxious for, how are you doing this? How are you handling that? How does your organization handle the return to office, and what does that look like? It's funny, I use that term very purposefully now because early on I was using the same term a lot of other people use, which is return to work. And you get quickly reminded from your colleagues, oh, they've been working. They aren't returning to work, they're returning to office, maybe. So I got to be careful to say that the right way. But truly, companies that have a physical space may not, what I'm hearing from them is they may not reduce their footprint actually, because the name of the game has been densification. You know, how many people can you get per square foot or how many square feet do you need per person in an office setting? And the name of the game has been to shrink that as much as possible to get as many people in the same space. Well, this whole experience has caused a reversal of that approach. How might we use our existing space to host fewer people at a given moment, but make sure teams come together when they need to come together, and then they disperse perhaps for a while? Which functions need to remain in office all the time? Which functions never need to be in an office, and which ones need to be a hybrid? And how do we have a reduced overall headcount in our space and manage that? Well, the larger the space and the larger the person count, the more that technology can play a role in helping manage all of that. Even down to little things. I've been talking to some of my commercial real estate friends, many of whom are members of the association. Their clients, their tenants are asking them, how can you come and help us rearrange our workspace and introduce technology so that walking through the office, you don't touch as many things, so that your badge opens a door? Um, can we remove doors in more places? What can we do to make it so that people aren't touching things all the time? Well, that'll help flu season every year. You might have noticed flu season this year was lower than normal because of what we're doing for COVID. So technology can play a role. And I think that our role can be to highlight those best practices as what we're good at. What are others doing? What are your peers doing? And give them a chance to talk to each other.
Yes, very good, intriguing, and very creative, Brooks. Thank you for sharing
Sure.
that with us. So we too we service the technology industry at Human Capital Solutions. Our specialty is helping companies solve problems and seize opportunities, providing them with proven talent and business solutions. What do you think is the most important for association members, industry leaders, and supporters to know as we all work together to strengthen the technology community, Brooks, in our great state of North Carolina?
Well, I think that North Carolina, I just had an interview, I was interviewed today by one of the editors of the Raleigh News and Observer there's been some big news, as many of your listeners will know, about just in the past 48 hours or so, we've had Google announce that they're going to be bringing up to 1,000 software engineering jobs into Durham. And we've also had an announcement from Fujifilm, which despite that name is a pharma company, a $1.5 to $2 billion investment in Holly Springs, which is, you know, a wonderful but smallish community, but on the outskirts of Raleigh. And those two announcements came on the same day. And the questions I was getting from the press were, you know, why do you think why are we having such good luck still, even in this economic uncertainty that we're in, and maybe the strain on our talent pool? It's because we are very fortunate in North Carolina broadly, and certainly in hot spots in our state, but in the Triangle in particular, Charlotte in particular, to have a great combination of strong higher ed, strong K through 12. We have a great pipeline of talent. We've got to keep that going, make sure that families feel like the quality of the education their children can receive here is high, so that they will remain here and have their kids in school here. We have the three research level institutions, universities right here in the Triangle, and quite a few in the state. We're very fortunate that way. An amazing community college network, a private college network that's one of the largest in the country. So that whole higher education sector is extremely powerful, generating a pipeline. We have a lot of talent here already because of the great jobs that exist. And then, Bo, you know this because of the business you're in, people want to live here. I get calls every week, often every day, from people who find me somehow on the web, find our organization, and they say, I want to live, my family wants to come and live in North Carolina. We've looked all over the place on the web, and we've narrowed down our priorities and all the things we're after: quality of life, health care, cost of living, quality of education. job opportunities, the economy, and the fact that we are an economy that tends not to have huge peaks and valleys. We're very steady and strong. You put all that together, that's pretty powerful. So frankly, the best advice I've got is don't screw it up.
Yeah, right. Well, you are definitely in the right role. I feel your passion and I love your inspiring message to us today. Through this pandemic, we've lost so many lives. There's been great depression. A lot of our children in schools have wavered and suffered, but there's more hope going on right now, I believe, than we've seen in a long time. What do you think?
I think you're right. I think in addition to sort of consumer confidence, and you don't know how much of that is driven purely by things such as the stimulus payments and so on. But I think it's more than that. In my job, I talk to people like you, people who are entrepreneurs, people who have started businesses, people who lead businesses of all types and sizes. Our membership is broad; any entity can join. So we've got universities, we've got big brand name tech companies, we have Krispy Kreme, we have sports teams, the New York Stock Exchange, and we've got really an amazing array of members. And to a person, people are very bullish on this year and going forward. I'll just tell you, one of the discussion points of my newspaper interview today was that in our own association, just as an example, the first quarter isn't even over yet, and it's going to be a record quarter in our revenue from new members joining. And that's a blend of brand new members who have come out of nowhere or we've been nurturing, as well as companies that might have been a member in the past, but they lapsed either during or prior to COVID, just to be conservative about resources, who are actually reaching back out to us to say, we're ready to come back sooner than we thought. How can we reactivate our membership? All of those are great signs. So I do think optimism is strong. Hiring is strong. We're about to host in April our spring Tech Jobs Expo. It's going to be virtual, and we've already got more than a dozen companies signed on that have hundreds of jobs available, real jobs that are highly skilled, available for people. So all those to me create some great tea leaves.
Hmm, that's wonderful. Let's go to our chat room if we could, Brooks. If I can see if you can see, can you see the questions? If you can, I'd be happy to read them.
I see one here. It says, when you look at sections of the nation that have been historically known for R&D and tech, like Silicon Valley, Boston, RDU, how do you think NC will fare in continuing to attract talent and investments? Well, I've sort of spoken to that a little bit. Some of the ingredients that we have here. Interestingly, I had a question about this a while back, like what makes you stand out against all these great other regions of the country? And they are great. They all have great things going for them. And I said, the Triangle doesn't necessarily, or even North Carolina, doesn't necessarily have a single thing that we're known for, unless it's maybe basketball. Maybe not this year. But anyway, we don't have a single thing we hang our hat on. There's not an immediate answer that everyone gives in common across the country when they hear about the Triangle or they hear about North Carolina. But all those ingredients I did mention to you, the strong universities, the location of state government here in the Triangle, the K-12 system being one of the largest systems and very strong one at that, the economy being stable, we are a draw for talent. People want to come here and live here. You put all those ingredients together, and I like to say, we are like a really good stew. It's good because there's lots of good ingredients. It's not just one thing. And as a result, we stand out because of that amalgamation, not because of just one thing. I'd also say that we are going to be an ongoing recipient, ongoing beneficiary, I believe, of this new mindset that this whole pandemic has created, which is you don't have to live in the Bay Area or in Boston or Austin or some other awesome place, but that could be quite crowded or expensive in order to have a good life and work for a really good employer. We're finding that talent is deciding they want to live where they want to live. Then they will determine for whom they will work. And they will work for organizations that will accommodate that. So companies are chasing the talent where they are. They're not forcing the talent to come to them.
Yes. Very well said. We're seeing certainly in the coastal North Carolina as well, huge shortages of housing inventory from folks who, you can live anywhere, why not coastal North Carolina as well as
Sure.
R2P, right? Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a follow-up question in the chat that sort of speaks to this as in a looking forward way, which is what do you believe are the biggest challenges in the tech space as we progress into the next few years or so? And I think despite what I just said, we do still face a squeeze on talent. There's more demand than there is supply. And so one of the questions we have to face is how do we make sure that highly skilled workers remain in this area because of opportunity, and there's no shortage of opportunity. And then how do we make sure that people who are entering into the tech field or the highly skilled worker arena can continually upskill? How can they enhance their value? Not everybody needs to go get another degree or even get a degree. I'm a big believer in getting a degree if you can, but not everybody has to do that. And so we talk about the terms stackable credentialing. Take a person who maybe has an undergraduate degree, maybe they have an associate's degree, and then they go on and they get a certification in something that's in high demand and makes them even more valuable to their employer. And then they go and get another training, perhaps in a parallel area of value, or a parallel area of work, so they can provide value in that area and shift. You can't go get a degree anymore and stop and be relevant 10, 20, or 30 years down the road. You need a good, solid basic education. You need to be adaptable. You need to be able to learn, collaborate, work in teams, and then upskill or reskill as demand requires it, because you just don't know what the particular trainings and certifications in demand are going to be 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So be prepared to adapt and be willing to sort of stack on these credentials to your basic training or basic education. That's going to be a challenge because companies come here because of reputation, but we got to have the skill workforce to feed that.
Absolutely, yes, fantastic. We've got a couple more minutes if we have. There's another question I think that's popped in.
All right, let's see. Technology sector changes and advances rapidly. It can be very difficult to stay current. What advice do you have for those of us in tech positions, but specifically in the tech industry? If I'm interpreting that right, it might get back to something I mentioned at the beginning of the show where I sort of compared Belk's department stores and
Right.
IBM. Yes, one of the things we track in our state of the industry report, I'll just give you one little factoid out of it. In North Carolina, we have been ranked number one 6 years in a row, and this year we're number two, slipped a little bit, in the percentage of women in the tech, so the percentage of the tech workforce that's female, I should say. And that percentage actually holds true in both ways you measure it. So what percentage of employees in tech organizations, tech companies, are female? And what percentage of tech workforce groups are female? And they're both about a third of the workforce of the tech workforce is female, and about a third of the tech sector employee base is female. We're very proud of that. That's still not representative of the overall population, so there's room to go there. And the dirty little secret of that stat is that women tend not to stay in technology after about 5 years. There's a real attrition problem in terms of women who stay on long enough to be senior roles in tech. And we have a lot of women leaders in tech who lament that problem, and we're all trying to figure out how to improve that situation. But I would just say back to this whole credentialing thing, find out where the value is, find out where the organization needs strength, and make sure that you are taking advantage of the amazing array of certifications that are online, community colleges that have amazing programs, perhaps a degree program, though not necessarily that. There's a lot of creative ways to remain very relevant to your employer and to employers generally, since you don't know where you'll be as time moves on.
Brooks, fantastic. So excited. Thank you for coming on the show today. We picked up a lot of information. We're very inspired. We're grateful to be in North Carolina, and we're grateful that you are in the role as a spokesperson and ambassador for technology for North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the chance to be with you.
We thank folks that have joined us. We thank folks who have put this little show together. And we do look forward to seeing you all again in another segment of Human Capital Matters.